Kia ora tātou. I'm Siang, the marketing manager at Hell Pizza, and I'm excited to welcome you back to another stop on Hell Pizza's Great New Zealand Book Trip. Today we've got a really special live author reading because we're going to get a sneaky little preview into a book that hasn't even been released yet. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Mahy Gill, who is a creative nonfiction Kiwi author who will be sharing her brand new book with us today, Epic New Zealand Adventurers, which will be released in around mid-July. Now, Maria has already written some epic stories, which some of you may have already read, like Toto's Journey, The King's Medal, and Anzac Heroes, which, by the way, won 2016's Book Awards for Children and Young Adults, as well as the Margaret Mahy Supreme Book of the Year Award. Now, in 2020, Maria also was awarded the Margaret Mahy Medal of Service to Children's Literature, which is an amazing effort. And in her new book, Epic New Zealand Adventurers, she tells 10 stories of daring and danger of adventurers from right here in Aotearoa. From the story of Sir Edmund Hillary's and his race to the South Pole to circumnavigating the world in a yacht with 16-year-old Laura Decker. I'm really excited and really privileged to get to introduce her new book to all of you today, and we hope you really enjoy this special event. So now it's time to pass over to you, Maria, and I'll come back a little bit later for some Q&As and of course announce the 2 winners of today's book. We hope you really enjoy this, and over to you, Maria.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Mahy Gill taku ingoa. Greetings everyone, I'm Mahy Gill and I'm really excited to be here today. I've got a whole lot of interesting things to show you. I'm going to talk about what inspired me to write about adventurers, Epic New Zealand Adventurers. And so I'm going to show you some photos of what I looked like when I was your age. And I'm going to also talk about some of the books that I read that inspired me and books that I have written. And then I'll get straight into one of the stories from Epic New Zealand Adventurers. So here we go. Here's the first photos. They're really old looking photos, but you can see the caravan that we traveled with in Australia. We actually lived in a caravan park for quite a while. That's the first one on the, it's my left, so I'm not sure if it's going to be on, it might be on your right. So we lived in that, in a caravan park and went to school in the Gold Coast in Queensland. And then the caravan that's on the right with the van and the box, that's called a cabana, and it would lift up like that, and the roof would lift up and then the sides would lift out, and we had a little annex. And we travelled all round down the coast of Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, and then came back up the inside. And we went fishing and we looked for gemstones, and we went to a lot of wildlife animal parks. So you can see me feeding some koala kangaroos there, and I've caught a hammerhead shark there on one of the pictures as well. So it was a great experience, and you're probably wondering, how did I do my schooling all that time? Well, I did correspondence school and I loved doing it, and I used to write about what I was seeing, and the outback really inspired me to write stories about what I was seeing. My brother and sister weren't so good at doing their schoolwork, but I thrived in that environment. And that's probably why I like working from home now, because I've had that experience of working by myself independently. And then when I was in my early 20s, I got, I had that travel bug from when I was young, when we were traveling, and I went off and did travels myself all around Europe, Egypt, China, India, and you probably think, oh gosh, she must be rich, but I wasn't. I was a backpacker, and I would work in some of those countries. Like I was a nanny in England, I was a nanny in Greece, I worked in a bar, a cafe. So I used to work, and then I would go off and travel. And so this is me in Egypt on a camel. I've got a scarf on my head, and we rode around the pyramids and the Sphinx, and rode down the in a felucca boat down the Nile. It was a wonderful experience. I also went to India. I did nearly all these travels by myself. I was one of these people, I'd make a decision, I would go, and people would say, yeah, I want to come. And then other things would happen for them, and I'd go, well, I'm still going. And so I went to India, and that's not me, obviously, on the elephant. I was the elephant in front. Now, nowadays, it's not so good to ride elephants, because the training program for the elephants is not good, but we didn't know that back then. And this was actually quite a momentous day, because Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, actually got assassinated on that day. And when we came back from our elephant trip, we walked into the room and saw everyone dressed in white. We knew something really big had happened, something very sad had happened, and we found out she had died. So it was actually quite a dangerous time, but we were in the best place. We were in an animal wildlife park. So as a traveller, you don't know that things are going to happen, and you become a risk taker, a person who learns survival skills, because you need to. You're on your own wits. I also went to China, and it had only just opened up to foreigners. You can see my big woolly hair there in one of the pictures. And of course, the best thing was seeing the pandas in China. They really are as cute as they look. And I went to the Great Wall and just had a wonderful time. Biked a lot of it, went on trains, and absolutely loved it. And it gave me a real appreciation about other people's cultures, and just a love of traveling and adventures. And that's what, I was always reading too when I was young. And now as an adult, I've been reading all these different books. Some of them are fiction. You can see Divergent and the Maze Runner there, but lots of other true stories, and some of them are fiction from the war, because war stories are adventure stories as well. So they inspired me, as well as my own travels, to write some books about some famous New Zealand adventurers. And Icebreaker is about a Captain Frank Worsley, a New Zealander from Akaroa, Christchurch area. And he was on the Endurance ship with Sir Ernest Shackleton. Now, everyone around the world knows Sir Ernest Shackleton, and say that, it was because of him that they survived that trip, because their boat sunk and they were stuck on the ice, and they had to get to sail to some islands to survive. But actually, they wouldn't have survived without Captain Frank Worsley, because he was the one that had the incredible navigation skills that helped them get to those islands, and the incredible sailing skills. And he came from little old New Zealand. I've also got their Anzac heroes, and that's about the men and women who went to war, and they are incredible adventure stories too. Sad ones, incredibly brave ones. And so I wanted to write those when we were remembering World War I a few years ago. I also wrote Abel Tasman's story. And what was interesting about that book was the material that the books that I was reading had been written 20 years ago, and they were saying that he had discovered New Zealand, Australia, and the Pacific Islands. And I thought, what? How can you discover something that's already been found? Maori have been in New Zealand for hundreds of years, same with the Pacific Islanders, and the Aboriginals had been in Australia for thousands of years. So it's not a book about him discovering those islands, because you can't discover something already found. It's a book about him putting those countries on the global map for the very first time. And you can see some of the pictures from the books. I've been very lucky to work with some incredible illustrators. Alistair Hughes did the Icebreaker and a few other books that I've done, the King's Medal and the Ernest Rutherford book, and Marco Ivanchik, who was only 21 the first time we worked on a book together. And we've done around about 6 or 7 books now, and his artwork is also incredible. So, epic New Zealand adventurers. I decided to write this book last year, and I pitched it to Upstart Publishing, and I then had to decide who I was going to have in it. Now, if you've got a piece of paper in front of you, I want you to number it from 1 to 10 and see if you can guess who it is. I'm going to give you some clues, and I'll tell you at the end who they are and see if you've got some of them right. Well, the first one is really obvious. He climbed Mount Everest, but I'm not telling that tale in this book. I'm telling the tale of when he raced to the South Pole in a tractor. Number 2 is National Geographic International magazine said she is one of the greatest explorers, and hardly any New Zealanders know her. She solo walked to the magnetic North Pole with her husky Charlie. It's an incredible story of bravery and survival. The third one, you probably recognize her as well. She is a world famous pilot and set some records quite a long time ago of being one of the first to fly from England to Australia and then New Zealand. The fourth one was actually 14 years of age when she set off on her solo trek circumnavigating the world. And she was 16 when she finally arrived back at her starting point. Number 5 is a Maori lady who trekked in a forbidden military zone in the Western Desert, really dangerous, and survived. Number 6, I've written about him before in my New Zealand Hall of Fame. He used traditional navigation techniques to sail a waka from Tahiti to New Zealand. Number 7 is an Australian born, but he lives in New Zealand, and he was the first person to sail in a kayak all around Australia. He's also done New Zealand and Great Britain. So what an incredible feat that is. Number 8 is a couple who have just got back from their biking trip from the very top of Alaska right down to the very bottom of the South America. And it took them a few years. Number 9 was the first woman who climbed Mount Everest without oxygen. And number 10 were 2 New Zealand guys with a British man who found the source of the Nile River. So that's why I've called it epic New Zealand adventurers, because these are just incredible adventures, and they were all in the media when they did their trips. So see if you can guess who some of them are. Now I'm going to show you a book trailer of my book. I love making those. I had to share that with you. So the story I'm going to share with you is Mark Watson and Hannah Black. So you'll be able to put that into your number of your list. So Mark and Watson, just bikes and a little backpack, traveled. You can see the map here. Traveled right from the very top of the Americas down to the very bottom. And so I'm going to read their story to you. On a freezing day, Mark and Hannah pedaled their bikes out of the oil mining town of Deadhorse. They carried bear spray and bear bells at the ready in case they ran in trouble. They cycled on unsealed highways through vast landscapes of Arctic tundra and forest, passing moose and shallow lakes. Thunderstorms threatened, hail pelted them, and ice nibbled at their fingers. Each day they rose before dark, ate breakfast in their tent, packed up camp and rode for 5 to 8 hours, stopping for breaks. They continued until dusk, then pitched their tent beside spruce line lakes, watching beavers building their lodges. In Canada, they passed glaciers, avalanche debris, a fjord, and a canal. Logs strapped together floated downriver. First Nation totem poles dotted the landscape. In British Columbia, got a bit behind there's the one I want. In British Columbia, a black bear crossed the road, stopping to eat berries on the verge. Hannah and Mark waited for it to disappear into the bush, bear spray clutched in their hands. But it wasn't afraid of them or the passing cars. A truck driver wound down his window. "I'll drive slowly past. Why don't you ride beside me, out of sight of the bear?" That's a bit of Australian accent more than an American. They did, wary of it picking up their scent as they cycled past. Another time, Mark cycled ahead, looking for a grass verge to camp in the dusky light. Behind, Hannah shouted a warning. He glanced up. An enormous grizzly bear 20 meters away also turned around. Mark's eyes widened in shock. Grizzly and man fled from each other. Once Mark's hammering heart quietened, he remembered thinking it looked like a big, cuddly teddy. Days later, he saw a dead bear on the side of the road. Mark and Hannah looked at its open jaw and saw teeth as big as fingers, not so cuddly. One afternoon, they saw 2 bear cubs on the side of the road. They slowed to look at how cute they were, then wondered where the mother was. Hannah spotted her on the other side of the road. They had been told never to come between a mother and her cubs, and they were in the middle. With hearts racing, Hannah and Mark took off fast. In Wyoming, USA, a truck with snow chains stopped. An elk hunter leaned out of his truck window. "No use carrying on with those. You won't get through." "Really?" "Yep, 2 feet of snow on the pass. We needed chains." But Mark and Hannah weren't prepared to give up. At first, they rode along the truck's wheel tracks, but the higher they cycled, the thicker the snow was until they were pushing their bikes through a meter of it. Down the other side, they used one leg as a tripod to balance their bike and help slow them down as they skidded on the hard-packed snow. Around them, the conifer trees looked like a scene from a Christmas movie. In mid-December, they crossed into New Mexico, where adobe houses, weathered volcanoes, and thorny cactus plants were the norm. On the dusty ground, they saw a goose-stepping tarantula, and later a rattlesnake curled up. When they crept closer to take a photo, it reared up and scared them away. One night in Mexico, they had gone to sleep in an abandoned building. Hannah woke when she heard a mosquito buzzing. She turned on the torchlight and saw above their heads a scorpion, the size of her hand, creeping towards them. She shook Mark awake. The scorpion scuttled further away, but not taking any chances, they set up their tent inside the building. Some nights it was difficult getting to sleep with coyotes howling outside. One evening they heard an animal pacing around their tent. It howled and yipped. Was it Puma? They had seen tracks earlier that day. Any minute they feared a mountain lion would attack their tent. Mark unzipped the tent and peered out. Hannah peeked behind him. A small, fluffy Andean fox snarled nearby. They'd camped in its territory, and it was most displeased. On a hot and sweaty day, they reached a jungle river they had to cross. They took off most of their clothes and carried their bikes overhead through deep water. As they emerged on the opposite bank, a man appeared. "There's crocodiles in that river." Luckily, they weren't that hungry that day. On 7th of September 2017, Hannah woke with a jolt, an earthquake jolt. She had experienced many growing up in Christchurch, so knew it was significant. For 90 seconds, the hotel's concrete walls swayed and trembled. They hurriedly grabbed their gear, but the only way out of the building was down a stairwell in the middle of the building. They daren't risk getting trapped. When the shaking stopped, they rushed outside where frightened locals milled. Later, they heard it was an 8.1 magnitude earthquake, and 98 people had died in southern Mexico. Mark and Hannah weren't in any rush to finish their trip. They spent a year in Peru, zigzagging back and forth over the remote Andes between Argentina and Chile in March 2020, they heard chilling news. People were dying in China and then Italy from COVID. At first, they thought the pandemic wouldn't spread to South America. They were too far away, weren't they? But then a cruise ship docked in Patagonia in early March 2020. And when the tourists disembarked, they released COVID into the country. Within hours of the news breaking out, businesses closed. They didn't want tourists. The national parks and borders shut. The New Zealand government urged New Zealanders to come home. Hannah and Mark rushed to San Diego airport. Twice they booked a plane home. Each time the airline cancelled it as countries locked down. They queued for hours, hoping to get onto a standby flight. Then San Diego went into lockdown. The couple were stuck. After camping for 2 days at the airport, they boarded a plane, arriving in Auckland 36 hours before New Zealand went into lockdown. In 2022, the borders reopened and they flew back to Chile to continue cycling to the bottom of South America, finishing in May 2023. So what an epic journey that was, and the fact that they had to stop it near the end because of the global pandemic. So maybe put your hand up if you like to ride bikes. I do. I ride my bike all around where I live. So that's why I wanted to share that story, because I figured that quite a few of you have had the experience of riding bikes and would enjoy it. So just going to quickly touch on a couple more stories. This is the one where they ride these fast boats down the Nile River through quite a few countries. They have crocodiles trying to attack them, hippos charging them, lions roaring in the morning. And if you think that's scary, it's not the worst thing that happens to them. So you have to read their story. And as I said earlier, she was 14 years of age when she decided she wanted to circumnavigate around the world. She actually was taken to court 8 times to try and prevent her from doing it. The Dutch courts thought it was a too risky thing to do, but she had been born on a ship and had lived most of her life on yachts. And so she was a very skilled sailor, so she knew what she was doing. And this is the woman who most people don't know her. And she, with her husky dog Charlie there, came across quite a few polar bears. They're considered the biggest predator in the world. And she tackled them all on her own. So see if you've guessed who they are. I will tell you. The first one is Edmund Hillary, second is Helen Thayer, third is Jean Batten. I bet a few of you got that one. Laura Decker, some of you might have heard of her. Number 5 is Lisa Tamati. Number 6 is Mahy Brightwell. Number 7 is Paul Caffin. Number 8 is Mark Watson and Hannah Blake. Number 9 is Lydia Brady. And number 10 is Cam McClay and Garth McIntyre. Aren't they incredible adventurers? Whoops. So I just wanted to end with that probably all of you have experienced an adventure of some kind, whether, you know, like even going to the park and the beach or on holiday somewhere is an adventure, because you're exploring a new area for the first time. And it's giving you the experience of meeting new people, taking risks, and getting to see what a beautiful and exciting world we live in. So now I'm going to hand it back to you, Sian, because we've got some questions which I'm really excited to answer.
Thank you so much, Maria. The story of Mark and Hannah is such an amazing story. You know, so many little adventures, well, not little, but so many big adventures rolled into one big one. And I think you did such an amazing job at, you know, being able to fit all of their you know, smaller adventures and still paint such a detailed picture of their experiences. So yeah, thank you. And I think a little bit earlier we're talking about, you know, how we really love your work, and it's so important to tell these stories to our tamariki, and you know, plant all these little seeds of adventure nice and early, so you guys get out there and, you know, go explore new things and new experiences for yourselves. There's so much to be learnt from the experience of the people who've already done so much already. So yeah, we really hope you're inspired to after school, get out there and find something new.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's start on some questions. So the first couple of questions we've got is coming in from Howick Intermediate. They would like to know how you chose the adventures that went in your book.
Well, as you can imagine, it was a really hard decision. Some of them were really easy. Like I had to have Sir Edmund Hillary and Jean Batten because people would have said, hey, you've missed out the two most famous adventurers. So I had to have them. But I wanted to tell a different story than Mount Everest, because there's some wonderful books already telling those tales, and same with Jean Batten. So I chose some different adventures for them. And then there's a couple of magazines like the National Geographic, and there's another one, I've forgotten what it's called, Wilderness, I think it's called. And I was able to find some names through that. And good old Googling, I Googled New Zealand adventurers, and that came up with a few as well. And so I finally narrowed it down to the 10 that I have, and it had to be something quite epic, because I nearly had some people that had done the top of New Zealand right down to the very bottom of New Zealand, but a lot of people are doing that now, so it's not considered as epic as some of the just shows you how much New Zealanders are adventurers and explorers, because so many people have done that trip now. So that's the reason why I didn't include that adventure, but some of you might decide to do that trip yourselves one day. Yeah,
I really like how you pick some of the lesser known adventures, and that really sings to the spirit adventure, right? You're discovering new things, new paths that people have trodden, and sharing that. So that's awesome. While you were writing these stories, did you have any of the adventures? You know, were there any of these adventures that you really wanted to go on as well?
Yes, because I have sailed down the Nile River before, and so it really reminded me of that trip, and how cool it was to sail in a felucca down the Nile River. But Lisa Tamati's one is also in Egypt, and it's the Western Desert. And when I was traveling there, it would have been a closed area, but now it's a tourist area, and it's incredible. It's like there's this deserts where the limestone the weather has weathered, you know, like lions and camels and all sorts of shapes in the desert. And to me, that sounded really exciting. And I've always wanted to do South America. I don't know if I'll ever get that chance, because I love animals, and like the monkeys and the birds, and the such incredible diversity of animals in South America. So I would have loved to have gone there. Yeah. South America is somewhere I haven't been to, and it's just a whole new world that, you know, I can't even fathom what it'd be like to be in the jungles and hearing all the different animals and the different birds and the insects and frogs. Yes. Yeah, that'd be really exciting. Okay, so Papatoe Intermediate, room 1, Papatoe. They would like to know if you had a favorite story out of all those stories, and any particular one would be your favorite. It is probably Mark Watson and Hannah Black's one, the cycling one, because I love to cycle myself, and it made me think, oh, I wish I was young again. And I had the guts to do that. Like, I traveled a lot by myself, and I think back now and think, gosh, I don't know why I went off on my own. I should have waited to travel with other people, because it was scary traveling on my own. But yeah, to do it with someone else and to cycle that distance and go to all those so many different environments, I just think that would be an incredible experience. And you know, I'd love to do some biking trips in New Zealand, so it's inspired me to you know, maybe think about doing some of those, and I'm hoping that will inspire some people to do some adventures like that, because when I was young I used to read adventure stories, and so did Sir Edmund Hillary. He used to catch a train to school every day, and he would read an adventure book. And so adventure stories can inspire people to go on their own adventures.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to share them, right? If you ever get inspired to ride your bicycle down to Wellington, we'll make sure we keep you fed along the way with some pizza.
And write
cool.
about it too. Write about
Yeah.
your kids. Like, I've used the creative nonfiction style of writing, where you make it sound, instead of just saying I did this, I did that, I did this, you make it really exciting. So you use what I call super powered verbs. And so, you know, like, instead of saying ran or walked, they charged through the forest. You know, make it really exciting by using those super charged verbs. So yeah, give it a go.
Cool. Now, who's next? So Ashburton Intermediate, class HK4. Blake, and I'm sorry if I've pronounced this wrong, but Hezkia and Blake would like to know, how did you get these ideas? And what inspired you to start writing in the first place?
Being a reader, when you read lots of wonderful books, it makes you think, oh, I'd like to write one of those stories as well. And so I've always been a voracious reader. And when I had children of my own and was reading stories to them, I thought, oh, I want to write these stories. So I thought I was going to be a fiction writer, but I ended up writing, well, 65 now, non-fiction books. Oh, I think there was one picture book, and that's the little dolphin one that's at the back there. And yeah, it's a job that I absolutely love, because I've always been an ideas person. You know, I've always had, and when I was young, it was like people thought I was coming up with crazy ideas, but now it's like all those ideas that pop into my head all the time. Now I can, you know, write them and turn them into stories and share them with children and inspire them to either go on adventures or care for the environment, or read about famous historical people. So I sort of want to write books that children will enjoy reading, but also can use for projects if they have a project coming up that they need to research.
Cool. And I mean, you've done a lot of travel yourself. Have you ever written about any of your own experiences?
No, I did when I was at Teachers College. I wrote a little bit about one of the trips, but no, I haven't. Oh, actually, I have. One of the first things I wrote was a fictional story, but using my travels around Australia in a caravan, just one part of it. But I need to revisit that sometime and yeah, maybe send it out. Never sent it to a publisher. So it was one of those stories I had to write first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sorry, that was a bit of a curveball. That was a question from Siang Tay from Our Pizza. Now, so the next question is coming from Leamington Primary School, room 15, which is really nice, really interesting. Now, I think you mentioned you'd met Mark and Hannah, but have you met any of the other adventurers that you have written about?
I didn't actually meet Mark and Hannah. I spoke to them on the phone, had a long interview with them on the phone. They were so interested And I also spoke to Lisa Tamati on the phone. I had spoken to Mahy Brightwell when I wrote my New Zealand Hall of Fame. So I use all that information for this story as well, and just asked some questions by email. And most of the time I either read their books or those, like, of course, Sir Edmund Hillary and Jean Batten have passed away. So there was quite a few books written about them that I could use for research, but no, I haven't met any in person. It would be lovely to do so possibly in the future. So watch this space, I might do.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to spend, like, I guess even having a meal, or having a coffee or somewhere with these people. There'll be so many other little details that just get uncovered through conversation.
Yes, but they live all over New Zealand or they live overseas, so that's why I wasn't able to see them.
Yeah, probably on another adventure.
Yes.
Making us all jealous.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, Waipawa Primary School, room 7. So they want to know, how old were you when you first published your first book?
I get asked how old I am all the time. And I used to get embarrassed by the question and go, I'm not, sort of muffle the answer. But I've got past that point now. I was 40 when I wrote my first story. My daughter had just started school. Wow. And I've been writing for 20 years, so you can guess how old I am. Yeah, I'm quite old. And but it was good coming at it at that age because I'd had life experience and was at a point in my life that I had finished teaching. I just was doing a bit of relieving, and so I could really put my time into it, and especially good when the kids were young and at home. And so I've always been here for the kids because I'm writing at home. I can go to their school. I was able to go to their school sports and all that sort of thing. So it's been a fantastic career to be, available for my kids, but writing something that I absolutely love doing.
Well, that's amazing. And being able to balance it all, that's just, that's amazing work. And I don't think you're old at all. I think your sense of adventure still, you can still see and hear your sense of adventure, and that's the fountain of youth, I feel. And Brianna from the same room wanted to know if you've had any other jobs apart from being an author and a writer.
Well, I've had quite an array of jobs over the years. I have been a teacher. I taught at intermediate and I relief taught at primary. I was a secretary when I first left school, working in England and New Zealand and not in Australia. And I've been a shepherdess, believe it or not, in Israel.
Oh, wow.
And I've been a nanny in Greece and in England. So quite a wide amount of variety of jobs. And yeah, it was because I traveled and I forgot that I worked in a pub. I worked and a restaurant as well. I worked in a pub called The World Turned Upside Down in England once.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like for some reason I wasn't surprised that you've done lots of different jobs and things like that. I guess it's part of that adventure spirit, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Cracking on. So sorry, I've just lost my place. And we've got one more question. We've got time for one more question from Waipawa School again, and it's from Declan. It's probably the most important question of today. If you were Prime Minister for a year, what would you do?
Well, of course, doing things like trying to get rid of poverty and making sure children, getting good care and lots of things like that. But one of the things that really struck me was that making sure that all schools had libraries and librarians and lots of books for children to read. I just think, and yeah, and like Duffy Books scheme of getting books out to schools, to children, so every children has a library of their own at home. I just think schemes like that would be really great.
Yep.
Support them and what they're doing. But yeah, it's every school having a library and a librarian, I think, is such a key thing to help literacy in schools. So yeah, it's one of the things I would love to, you know, help make happen.
I'd vote for you. You know, having young kids, I do everything I can to, you know, encourage them to read or sit down and read with them, and because it's so important for not only, you know, learning and sort of developing your mind, but it's just such a you know, to be able to get all the inspiration for things that you want to do or things that you want to see, as you know, and so much of that can come from stories and books and things that you read and see. So yeah, no, it's great answer. Now, before we go, it's time to announce the winners of today's book. And first winner is Kiri from Green Meadows, and Green Meadows Intermediate, and also Zoe from RTM Muri School. So yeah, so thanks for getting involved. We know we've been so stoked and so privileged to be able to speak with you, Maria, get some insights into, you know, that your inspiration into where you've come from, and everything you've done. It's a real inspiration for not only me, but I'm sure for many people around New Zealand. So thank you very much. Thanks to all of you guys that have tuned in today. We hope that you've really enjoyed this episode of the Great New Zealand Book Trip. So yeah, thank you.
And thank you from me as well. Thanks for all of you tuning in into House Challenge, making this wonderful opportunity exist for authors and for schools. It's fantastic.
No worries. So yeah, all right. Thank you very much. Ka kite, everyone. Don't forget to, after school, go on your own little adventure. If you've got chores and stuff to do, then get those out of the way, and start thinking about what adventures you want to go on over the weekend.
Absolutely.
All right. Ka kite.